Hey everybody, this is Reba. I'm here with Allison today, and we are recording our sessions on conversations in the decades. And Allison, this has been a fun podcast because we've talked to people in their 20s and 30s, and today we're talking with Beth Baxter, who's joining us, and Beth's in her 40s.
I know, and it's getting real because earlier it was like, oh, we were talking to the youngins, but now it's kind of hitting our era and our generation, really, because we were, it was the Zoomers, then the millennials, and I think we're smack dab in with the Gen X. And I'm a big fan of this generation, and so it'll be fun to talk. And again, you'll get to hear some perspective of what it was like 10 years ago for you, and then we'll get to hear from you, what we're looking forward to, right, Reba?
Oh yeah, exactly. I loved my 40s. I did. I just loved my 40s. So so I'm hoping that you guys are loving yours. But Beth, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Just a little bit about Beth. Beth is an executive director for senior living facilities here in Tennessee. Beth, you're married. You have a teenage son. So you are just right in the middle of it. So tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. I am a Tennessee girl born in the South.
Yep.
And I'm 45 years old, so smack in the middle of the 40s decade. And like you said, I'm married to a police officer. So like that's a whole nother podcast in and of itself. Law enforcement, wife, life. It's a crazy life. So just juggling that. Have a 13-year-old boy, teenager. So this is definitely a fun stage. As you said, I'm an administrator in healthcare. I started professionally fresh out of college, and I remember my first job. I was the director of social services, which was a social worker. So I started as a social worker, and I remember someone introduced me to a family member, and they said, "This is our director of social services." And the lady said, "You are awfully young to be a director." And which at that point in time, I mean, I was the director of myself. It's a one-person department. So really, it just makes me sound good, the director of social services. But I remember that story vividly. And now as I think back, I am 20 years into my professional career in senior living. And I remember for years I was the youngin'. And now when I say I've been in senior living for 20 years, it blows my mind. I'm like, how can it be 20 years? So started as a social worker and then have moved into more operations and administration in the last probably 7 years as a licensed healthcare administrator. And so that's just what I do. Busy juggling life between wifing well and momming well, and then really in a very rewarding career that is demanding, but also I feel ministry minded and missional. So it's definitely a lot to juggle.
Yeah. I think that is one of the things that kind of you in the 40s. I think that's one of those aha moments that I remember experiencing in my 40s was like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this a while now. I mean, it just seems like in my mind, I was always 27. Right. And then all of a sudden I woke up. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, I think I'm 40-ish.
We say the other day, and the other day is 10 years ago now.
Right.
Yeah. That happened to be the first time I was called a veteran missionary. And I was like, veteran missionary, that no, I don't like that term because it makes you sound old. But now I'm embracing it because I'm 20 years into the Dominican Republic and that ministry. And so it does shock you a little bit, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
I think one thing that's cool about the 40s is that somehow people look at you different on a respect level. It's like you're in your 30s and 20s. They're like, yeah, you're in your, But all of a sudden, it's like you're in your 40s and everybody's like, oh, what did she say? And I'm like, oh, people are listening to me now. Wow. This is so there was a transition in that. I don't know if you guys are experiencing that or not, but all of a sudden people look at you differently than they did 10 years ago.
I would agree for sure.
Hopefully. Yeah.
All right. So Beth, tell us a little bit about maybe your testimony, your story of a relationship with Christ and a little bit about that before we dive into the decades. Because I always think this is important for people to hear a little bit about people's journey.
Absolutely. Sure. I was born into a great family, a great Christian home, and just privileged to that. And I love the fact that I had parents that understood and showed me the love of Christ in a very real way. And so I feel like my view of God as my father was shaped by my parents, who were very loving, I grew up in a conservative home, but they were very loving and made God's word real to us. And so, it was part of our life. It was culture. It was every day. But I came to know the Lord at a young age. But of course, um, your life doesn't transform significantly when you grow up in a great home already. But really into my high school years and college days, I started to understand that my walk with the Lord needed to be personal and not just between what I had been raised with, but more intentional, and just grew in Him and my relationship with Him, and just searching and digging and just coming to know the Lord just in a very real way, loving His word, loving hearing from Him, what it has to say, understanding that it's not just a big broad book of what to do and what not to do, but understanding that there's guidance, in His word, and just really learning to love the word of God.
So good. Because I think that's, in our journey of aging, I think we
Mhm.
also grow spiritually.
Absolutely.
And so there is that, not only that maturing as a person, but
Mhm.
also hopefully maturing spiritually.
Mhm.
And
Reba, I
when we
remember sitting next to my mom in church when I was a child and watching her cry and think, what is wrong with her?
right,
And now here I am in my 40s, and my teenager looks at me and thinks, what is wrong with her?
yeah, yeah, I know.
It becomes very real, as you deal with just loss, grief. You experience God in a closer way. Heaven seems different. It's absolutely different at this age.
Yeah,
And I
um,
think we're starting to experience, if we haven't already, we're starting to experience that even so come Lord Jesus,
Hmm.
that I mean, I was like, I'm really enjoying my life in my 20s. I
Hmm.
want this to happen. I don't want this to happen. So don't, you want him. But then switching to where you're like, I really long for, our completed faith. And so I
Mhm.
think that we're starting to, I think in the 40s, that's where it really became real for me, to where I was like, no, my
Mhm.
relationship with God is, less about this word, more about the future to come. And so that's kind of what I've experienced as well. So what you've said is like, yeah, that's, I think,
Mhm.
I think this is a decade where in our spiritual walk, that's starting to become more real.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And I think sometimes, at least in the younger times of our lives, you have a lot of answers. And I think the older you get, you have a lot of questions, you know? And
Yes.
I think that drives us to prayer. It drives us to come Jesus quick. It comes to all those
Mhm.
things because I think, you realize, yeah, maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was when
I
I was
know way less
25.
than I thought I did about 10 years ago. And it's not because I'm forgetting stuff. That's another
Right,
story.
right.
But
Oh, that's good. So, Beth, tell us a few things. What's different? I mean, from your 30s to your 40s, what are some things that you see that are just kind of really different, maybe stick out as really different for you?
Um, Reading glasses,
Okay.
skin. I've been to the dermatologist 3 times in the last 2 months. I mean, those are practical changes. Everything is changing. One thing that I have noticed, though, a lot, that I would say different between my 30s to my 40s. In my 30s, and I told you I started my professional career as a social worker. I feel like I am a people advocate. I love people, and part of that also is, and tied up in that is, I feel like I was very aware of other people and their emotions and their feelings. And I think in my 30s, 20s and 30s, I often worried about what other people thought. Was I letting them down? Was I doing the right things to encourage them? And one of the things I've really noticed is I feel like I'm getting a whole lot comfier in who I am and comfortable in my own skin and accepting myself for who God created me to be. I've also kind of I feel like what's different is I've learned to become comfortable with what I say is uncomfortable things and uncomfortable conversations. I just this week at work, I had a professional colleague drop in, and I hadn't seen her for about a year, and she mentioned that her son had passed away in the last year from a fentanyl overdose. And what do you say to that? I feel like in my 30s, I would freeze. Now I feel like I've learned to lean in and to say, how are you caring for yourself right now? And, so not just being comfortable with myself, but uncomfortable with uncomfortable dialogue. And,
Mm.
learning to walk through hard things with people. I feel like loss is rare as we're younger, but as we're getting older, we're experiencing more of that in different capacity. And so, I just think that's one of the things that I've noticed a difference between, I think, last decade to this decade. It's just becoming more comfortable with both myself and just the uncomfortableness of life.
Mm. Have there been any surprises? I mean, we can talk about what's different, but maybe there's some expectations and you're like, oh, I'm surprised this happened or this didn't happen. Positives and negatives. What are some of the surprises that you've encountered in this decade?
Some of the surprises, I think, I'm a little bit unique. I didn't mention this before, but I'm an adoptive mother. So, I started my parenting journey a touch behind some of my peers. I do have peers in their 40s that are parenting children that are entering college. Mine is still in that early teen years phase, but I think some of the surprises as they get older is it's fun to be able to have almost like adult conversations with your child in this decade. That's a lot of fun. Being able to understand their humor and I feel like we have a peer kind of in the house, and that's been a lot of fun for us as far as a surprise. I think also just I guess one of the negatives, I guess, is just like you had said, a lot of the as we just the pressure we feel from others, and so in this generation, one of the negatives I would have been surprised with that child kind of sandwich in between is we're also parenting children and parenting adults, or parenting our parents, so to say. So kind of smack in between that generation of feeling the need to not let anybody down, running between this sport, but then also a mother in the hospital, or, I feel like I need to help over here and do this. There's a lot of juggling, and I think something that also has surprised me about this is uh, the requirement of intentionality in this age. I think that when you're in your 30s, I feel like I was so much more spontaneous and let's get together and let's go do this. And I have found out that I feel like friendships are different in my 40s. I feel like we say, let's get together. And then 8 months passes. And we intend to do that, but we're all in a different busy phase. We're not at play dates, watching our little kids. We're busy these days. And so I think nurturing relationships in my 40s has been a lot more work than I thought it would be.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, I think that's so true because, having friendships that have just stood the test of time, right? And people who have just done life with you for so long. And those are people that are always in your life, but it may not look exactly like it looked like
Yes.
10 years ago.
Mhm.
And you just have to, you have to be good with that,
Mhm.
I think, and people have to be good with you,
Yeah.
in being that way. So I do think those are transitions that
Yeah.
I saw as well. I'm sure, Beth, you probably have friends who are either a decade behind you, they're still in their 30s, or they may
Mhm.
be a decade ahead of you in their 50s. So having people in front of you and behind you in these friendships and relationships, how does that shape your conversations? How does that shape your,
Mhm.
how does that influence and affect you?
I think it's essential to have friends on both sides, like you said, and I've been blessed to have good friendships, outside of even work, where I'm around an older generation of seniors all day, every day, which is entertaining and hilarious, and also encouraging in and of itself. But I've been blessed and fortunate to have just friendships in the decades ahead. And I love to look to them and see, for me, how they are parenting their adult children, how they've made that transition. So as a mother, I want to make sure that I launch my child well, and that, is the goal for him is to send him out as a young adult into the world, I'm trying to watch how they do that. And I think it's been helpful, asking them the questions, how do you do this? What do you suggest? I think also they have helped me know to not sweat the small stuff. They have been great at encouraging me of that's not a big deal. It's going to be okay. So I think that those are absolutely essential. And I'm thankful also for those that are behind me, the younger generation. I have several of those friends, and often they'll come to visit and say, your house is so perfect. And I try to remind them, I miss toys in the living room. At 13, he's in his bedroom and he's playing his guitar and he's in his own space. And I try to just encourage them to soak in every moment. When they're little, your house is not going to be a mess filled with toys everywhere forever. And, I just think that it's important to speak into that and to encourage them as well, that it's, not to be discontent in the phase that they're in. This phase that I'm in has a different kind of loneliness than what they're experiencing.
That's interesting.
I think, yeah, that is important to have those conversations of just relatability and relational, and I think that type of connection is something. I mean, I was sitting around the table with some friends last night, and I was looking. There was the little young missionaries, and then there's missionaries that are really like 10 years behind me, and so I think those conversations are important.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think we do learn from each other, which I think is important. We can there's people we learn from, and I've been surprised sometimes at perspective I've gotten from the younger generation that maybe I had lost. Somehow I'd missed, and I had gotten, say, oh, ooh, that was a good point, or something that, the older generation ahead of me is like speaking into. So I do think having those friendships on both sides of that kind of help us retain some perspective a little bit. So what are you looking forward to as you think about, you've got a teenage boy right now, and a great kid. As you look forward and you think about the next 5 to 10 years, what are some things you're looking forward to?
I think, and I hate to rush seasons. I feel like it's, when we were younger, I kept thinking of, I don't have to carry a diaper bag, and when I don't have to do this, I hate to rush seasons, but I can't wait for things to slow down. I feel like we are in just a rapid, busy season. Once you start that parenting phase, I think it is nonstop, but in a different way now. It's busy. I'm looking forward to the time where we can slow down a little bit, and take time, really just to relax and enjoy, the day, and not feel like every night I'm going home and running straight into homework and dishes and packing lunches, and so trying to slow down. I think it's I'm looking forward to that, I think, the most.
That's good.
That's awesome. Okay, so we've talked about, what are you enjoying right now? We've talked about, okay, well, looking ahead or talking to your friends about the different decades, but right now in your 40s, what is something that you're just really enjoying?
I think, and I've talked about how I've become comfortable with uncomfortable. So I feel like at this phase, I am most enjoying very real relationships. And I feel like I've kind of filtered through some of the ones that are not real, and may just be for seasons. But I am really enjoying the realness of some friendships that are deep, that you don't, like what you said, Reba, that you don't have to maybe nurture like you did in the past, but they're there for a lifetime. Just real friendships and relationships that are a connectedness that you don't have to feel like you have to connect with on a daily basis, but when you need them, they're there, and they speak truth, and they speak just a level of truth that you don't get, I think, when you're younger. I'm enjoying that.
That's good. Yeah, I think, of course, Allie and I do this podcast together, but we're also very good friends. And so we have a lot of those types of conversations, probably even more so now in the last maybe 5 years than we did 5 years previous. Because I don't know, there's a kind of a level that you get to, and it's like, okay, enough with stuff that doesn't matter, or let's enough, let's quit playing around and ask each other the hard question, or,
Mhm.
check in with each other on how we're doing, in a sincere way. And I think
Yes.
those are things that as we get older, I think that combination, because you said it in a couple of ways, Beth, but you begin to say, you know what, I don't care who's impressed anymore.
Mhm.
I'm just exhausted
Mhm.
trying to impress people. I don't care who's impressed
Yes.
anymore. Right now, I'm on a mission with my life, and
Mhm.
I want to, and I want to grab some people with me that are going to help me as I move forward on this mission to do it well.
Yeah.
And I think finding it's so important to find those like-minded
Mhm.
friendships, but also there's some friendships that think a little bit differently. And so you can get a different perspective, and having a good balance of
Yes.
both. I think I've finally
Mhm.
am figuring that out, in this decade. It's fun.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
so Beth, you've got thinking back to, let's just say that there's a woman listening right now, and she's in her 30s, and she is dying to ask a question, and she's like, what advice would you give me in my 30s, that you didn't know, maybe you wish somebody had told you.
Mhm.
So Beth, speak to those that are coming up behind you.
Hmm.
Any advice you would give to
Yeah.
women sitting in their 30s?
I would probably say, find a good counselor, marriage counselor, a good someone that can pour into you too. When you get stuck, don't stay stuck. I feel like I have the pendulum in our generation has swung so far into self-care that I feel like we avoid any kind of self-care. And we feel like self-care looks and equals selfishness. I think one of the things that's important is find a way to care for yourself and nurture the relationships that matter most, which is your marriage. In this 20 years of marriage where I am, and parenting and busyness, we have to make a priority on ourselves in that way. And I think that it's easy to get caught up in parenting and the busyness that we forget that. And so, I try to always encourage people behind me to do what it takes to have good self awareness of where you need help. So when you need help, get the help. Don't stay stuck. I think I think I've spent a lot of years younger just going through motions, and I think that help is there and can help you move forward into a thriving relationship, both at home and with your friendships. So that would be
And I
my
think
best advice.
well, I think that's what we talked about at the beginning is we now are willing to say we don't have all the answers. And so your
Yes.
advice to find somebody who
Hmm.
you can say, okay, I'm not, something's off. What,
Hmm.
who can I talk to, or what can I take, can I ask you
Hmm.
this, or, and asking them, because I think, like you said, we don't want to, we're no longer just willing to just make it look like we have it all
Hmm.
together. We're okay
Yeah.
being vulnerable. And I think that's really important because we're coming out of maybe our 30s who we were trying to make it look perfect. And now we're like,
Hmm.
you know what? We don't have all the answers. It's okay that we don't have all the answers. Let's find
Hmm.
somebody who does, or let's work together on
Hmm.
this again, this community and connectedness. It's so important.
It is. And I think if I could sum it up in one word, it's intentionality, being intentional in so many of our relationships. It's just, you can't just, I think that you can't just expect it to happen and let it happen. And it's going to happen and it's going to be right and it's going to be okay. You have to be intentional in how you want them formed and how you want them to look like and how to nurture them and care for them well.
Yeah, that's good. Because I think life is filled with, you know, times when we're misunderstood, times when we're stuck, times when we're not sure how to go
Hmm.
forward. Life is filled with moments like that. And you either kind of let it spiral you down into like you said, Beth, where we're stuck and we don't move
Yeah.
forward, or you're like, okay, wait a minute, I'm going to do the hard work,
Yeah.
of moving myself forward. And
Hmm.
maybe that's letting something go. Maybe
Hmm.
that's grabbing something new. Maybe that's getting advice from somebody that, humbling myself and saying, hey,
Hmm.
I don't know what to do now. And I need help here. And I think those are all, man, that's great
Hmm.
advice, because I
Yeah.
think we all can we all can continue to be better versions of ourselves as we become more like Christ, and as we become more like he wants us to be, as we're intentional about who we are. So that's super advice. Love it.
I think I thought I would have it more together in my 40s. You know, I feel like I'm still playing adult, you know, I'm playing adult over here. But yes, I feel like it's time to just keep perfecting what we're doing and keep working on ourselves and being a better version of ourselves all the time.
I love it. I love it. Well, we usually try to end the podcast with some fun rapid fire questions. And these are just, you know, fun, silly, usually questions, just trying to get to know you a little bit better. So we're going to do that as we kind of bring our podcast to a close. And then we always have the same last question. So Allie, you want to kick off the rapid fire?
Yeah, and this could be, you know, this could be a book you're reading now or a book that you've always enjoyed and you always go back to. But what is one book besides the Bible that has impacted you?
You know, one that I have recently picked up again and read when I was young, but just recently have finished. I'm not a great reader. I'm going to say that. This is something that has surprised me in my decade of the 40s. I'm not a good reader anymore. So Audible and the library app and audiobooks are my friends. So when I say I read a book, I usually mean I listened to a book recently.
Yeah.
So one of my favorites that has been a long time favorite, I just listened to in the last month again, is The Hiding Place by Corey Ten Boom. And that's one of my favorites. I just love.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. I need to go back. I haven't read that one in a long time. So that's a good
It's
one.
a good one. It was good to re-listen to.
Oh, that's cool. All right. So favorite meal. I mean, if they said, Beth, you can have anything you want, you name it, it's right here. What are you picking?
This sounds simple, but it's good pizza. Not cheap pizza, good pizza. And I know you, Reba, so I know that you're in with me. Good pizza is my favorite.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And there's such a difference between the good pizza and the cheap pizza.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Yeah,
so what do you enjoy doing in your free times?
In my free time, you know what? I'm a crazy plant lady.
Yeah, you are.
I'm a crazy plant lady. I could spend hours watering and repotting my plants and nurturing my plants. And I think I'm a little old lady at heart. So I love my plants. That's my free time.
All right, it's awesome. And all right, so one more fun question, and then we'll ask you our last one. But do you have a favorite movie? Do you have a movie that just makes you laugh, makes you cry? You just love it. You watch it on repeat.
You know, I'm not a big movie person, surprisingly, but there is one that I feel like if it's scrolling through TV and it's on, I will always stop and watch it. And I do not endorse it due to its rating. Don't you love that? I love the Shawshank Redemption. It's a good story of justice served, and I love it. It's a good poignant story. So it's one of my favorites.
Very good. Very good. All right. Well, Allie, we always save this last one, so I'm going to let you take it.
Yeah. What does keep you rooted deep, Beth?
You know, outside of my faith, of course, I feel like I can't be rooted deep without my faith. But for me, gratefulness keeps me rooted. I think it's important to focus daily on gratefulness. Gratefulness takes my eyes off of me and it puts my eyes onto God and who is the good giver of gifts. And, you know, so I try to practice that on a regular basis. I think negativity can't coincide and coexist with gratefulness. So that's for me, gratefulness and a mindful practice of gratefulness keeps me rooted.
That's good. Good stuff. Well, this has been a fun conversation about being in the 40s. Two women here in their 40s. And so it's always fun. Thanks, Beth, so much for taking some time out to join us on the podcast. And I know that women are going to enjoy hearing this perspective as we kind of leap from our 40s. Now, next podcast, we're going to be diving into the 50s. And this is my zone. And so somebody said that the 50s are the new, you know, the new 40 or whatever, you know, it's we're getting younger. I don't know how you say that, but I do feel like there's some merit to that. So we'll see how it goes with the conversation, but thanks so much for being with us and for just kind of sharing your heart with us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, until next time, join us on Rooted Deep.